You're listening to the Retro Mo Podcast. I'm your host, Mo, and I love to play and review old video games and a few new games too. If you prefer to read instead of listen, check out my written reviews at retromo.substack.com. In this episode, I'll be sharing my experience with Final Fantasy VII for the PlayStation, released in 1997. I've scored this game 9 out of 10, an amazing game. My all-time favorite Final Fantasy game. Where do I even begin with this RPG classic? While Final Fantasy VI is considered the best in the series in my opinion, Final Fantasy VII is undoubtedly my favorite. Pokemon Yellow was the first RPG that drew me in as a young lad, but Final Fantasy VII introduced me to a style of RPG I had never experienced before. I was completely enraptured by the darker themes, the moody music, and the, at the time, stunning visuals. The refined active time battle system returns once again, but this time it's accompanied by the beloved Materia system. Final Fantasy VII was my first Final Fantasy game, and I remember being so confused and disappointed by the follow-up Final Fantasy VIII draw system. Using Materia just felt so right. Now I've come to appreciate how Square has injected some variety into their follow-up games, but my attachment to Final Fantasy VII systems may be a testament to how solid the RPG gameplay of Final Fantasy VII really is. That's one of the reasons I've gone back to replay Final Fantasy VII over and over again. With modern eyes, the visuals are a bit of a low point, because yes, they have aged poorly. For the time, the cinematics were incredible. The pre-rendered backgrounds, I think, still hold up fine. And the 3D models from the battle sequences look okay for 1997. I also spent many hours just spamming summons and watching the sometimes very lengthy animations. However, the low-poly models used on the world map and in the pre-rendered areas have been immortalized and memed endlessly. They certainly have not aged well. Some attribute the low-poly look to some kind of artistic decision, perhaps attempting to imitate the chibi-style sprites from the earlier games in the series, though others just chalk it up to early 3D growing pains. Square devs were likely not fully sure of the PlayStation's capabilities, and 3D modeling was a new art form in those days. We saw significant improvements in the models used in Final Fantasy VIII and Final Fantasy IX. The fantastic story is what has pegged Final Fantasy VII so high on many RPG gamers' lists. Final Fantasy VII demonstrated that video games could carry a serious narrative with dark or weighty themes. You've got a dystopian government, terrorism, grief, death, environmentalism, twisted experimentation. My first time playing through this game, I was so attached to these characters. I felt shock and sadness during that scene. If you've played the game, you know what I'm talking about. Graduating from the bright and cheery Pokemon series to Final Fantasy VII was quite a shift for me. Final Fantasy VIII and Final Fantasy IX didn't quite grab me like Final Fantasy VII. But when I went back to Final Fantasy VI, I had a similar experience with that fantastic story. Nobuo Uematsu's legendary Final Fantasy VII soundtrack not only perfectly bolstered the game's dark and moody vibe, it also launched many gamers into the world of video game music fandom. I had never thought to listen to video game music apart from gaming sessions until Final Fantasy VII. The music was so powerful, so moving. I just wanted to vibe out to these moody tracks. Some of my favorites include Anxious Heart, Main Theme, and Secret of the Deep. I burned myself a CD and listened to it on my portable CD player on the bus ride to school. I just wanted to be serenaded by Tifa's Theme, Flowers Blooming in the Church, Words Drowned by Fireworks, and so many more great tracks on this soundtrack. Many of these beautiful tracks are very listenable outside of the game. I will admit, it will take a concession from modern gamers who are lacking that hefty dose of nostalgia to go back to classic Final Fantasy VII. But if you can adjust to some of the underwhelming visuals from yesteryear, you will find an absolute treasure of a game, This is a must-play for any retro RPG fans. Thanks for listening to the Retro Mo podcast. As always, I do my best to keep all of my content spoiler-free and rated E for everyone. If you find this podcast enjoyable or helpful, tell a friend and consider giving a 5-star review on your favorite podcast app. If you have questions or comments, you can send an email to retromopodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Godspeed.